All right. Hello, everyone. Um, Welcome to today's webinar, Breaking the Silence, Open Conversation on Student Mental Health. My name is Maria Estrada, and I am thrilled to be your host for this important discussion brought to you by Unsinkable Youth and the LaMarsh Center for Child and Youth Research at York University. Before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to take a moment to do a land acknowledgement. I gather on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Anishinaabe on which we gather. I understand that the land recognized as Halton has been and is home to many First Nation, Inuit, Métis people from across Turtle Island and beyond. I also recognize the unique connection and relationships that Indigenous people and their ancestors have had with this land since the very beginning. I will continue to honor and respect this land and will take the path of truth and reconciliation to create change, awareness, and equity. As we dive in our discussion, I also like to take a moment to acknowledge the significance of this topic. Student mental health has never been more crucial, and we continue to navigate the challenges and uncertainties we face by young people today. It is essential for us to have an open conversation, challenge the stigmas, and foster a community where everyone feels supported. Today's session is designed to explore the crucial role of peer support in enhancing student well-being, featuring insights from those with lived experiences. And we have an incredible lineup of panelists joining us today who will share their knowledge and perspective. Let's start by introducing our panelists. First, we have Rebecca, who is the director of the LaMarsh Center. Rebecca, we're very excited to hear your insight and the role of research in improving young mental health. Next up is Felix, a recent psychology graduate from York University. Felix, your passion for empowering individuals and your personal journey is crucial to our discussion, and we look forward to your contribution and knowledge. The next panelist is Barira. She is a first-year student at McGill University and has been a dedicated program facilitator on Unsinkable Youth. Barira, your advocacy for youth mental health is inspiring, and we're so eager to hear all of your thoughts and knowledge. Last but not least, we have Isra. She is a master's candidate at York University. Isra, your focus on integrating biomedical and sociological models in your research is incredibly relevant. I'm very excited to learn more about your own lived experiences and knowledge with mental health. Now that we have introduced our panelists, let's discuss a little bit of what our conversation will entail. We're going to start with a few questions directed to our wonderful panelists, and we'll have the floor open to Q&As, which you can write in the chat. So any comments, questions, we have a wonderful staff, Vanessa, who she's going to be monitoring all of those pieces. So make sure that feel free to ask any question. Are we ready? Okay.
Yeah.
To kick us off, I'd like to address my first question to you, Rebecca. Could you provide an overview on some of the themes that you're noticing from students around their mental health? And what changes have you observed in the needs of young people?
Yeah, thanks so much, Maria. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Okay, great. Yeah, so I mean, the easy and obvious thing that I observe really is really high levels of anxiety. That is the main mental health challenge that most students are dealing with. And I've been teaching at York University for 12 years now, and would say there's been a dramatic change and increase in students' anxiety over those 12 years. I'm not sure if anyone's had the opportunity to read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, but I live that every day in my classrooms, that students are really, really anxious. And a couple of things that feed into that are like high levels of self-doubt and sort of low levels of confidence, which then sort of fuels this anxiety in everything that they're facing.
Thank you. And definitely one of the pieces, when I was in school and I think till now is that self-doubt and that anxiety. It's something that is definitely more persistent when you're in school and you're navigating all of the different challenges. My next question is directed to Felix. How has your lived experience as a psychology student shaped your perspective on mental health?
Yeah, that's honestly a great question, because I'm the type of person that never really identified with academia in school. Like I kind of got into psychology because I found it interesting. But getting into the later courses, like fourth year, third year courses where things were a bit more focused, I honestly found that all of this, like all of the experiences that have been shown to us in like all these textbooks and stuff, um, there's a kind of a before and after. There's a story. I took this one class called History of Mental Health, and it really put into perspective where I was in this story. And in learning that, it kind of sparked a passion in me for psychology and for mental health. And even understanding that, okay, academia is one thing, but actually having an impact is another. And so it got me thinking, okay, how can I have an impact? How can I balance the academia side and also kind of manifest all these things I'm learning into a real tangible thing? And so that's kind of what allowed me to end up where I am. And especially because, like I said, I never really identified with it. So it's just interesting to see myself here and to look back on my journey and be like, wow, like, um, I just, I don't know how this all came to be. But, again, I'm happy to have like kind of express some of my knowledge to other people and be that person to inspire other people. But that's really how my journey went. So yeah.
Yes, I have known you for a bit, and what I do know is that your passion for knowledge really feeds into your passion for being an advocate and helping. And I think those two really go well together. Um, and with this conversation, and I'm looking at Barira. Now I've had the pleasure of working with you for a while now. And you're kind of watching your transition from high school now going to university and, you know, far away from home. How has that impacted your mental health as a first year student? And also, what are you noticing?
That's a really great question. Yeah, I was just actually thinking about that very recently because yeah, so transitioning to university and I guess moving to a new city and learning to sort of live by myself and take care of myself has been something that I've seen in different stages. Initially, when I first moved here, it was more I guess the social demand of fitting in and trying to show other people that I was fine, that I think the experience that I have is that not only did I move to a new city, but I moved here with in a dorm with so many other people going through the exact same thing. So because of that, having a community of people sort of going through the exact same thing kind of tricks you into believing that you're in a safe space, that like whatever. So I kind of, what I did was I masked any kind of anxieties that I had. I just kind of went head first. But then now, as I'm slowly adjusting and kind of learning to meet the demands of not just school, but also my extracurriculars or, or other, just taking care of myself, the things that I normally wouldn't have done at home. that has taken a huge, I guess, toll on me in terms of not my general well-being, but also just my ability to, I guess, handle and to I balance every aspect of my life. And that is it's quite tough. It's gotten tougher, if that's what I'm trying to still illustrate. In the beginning, it was more just like, how can I show people that I don't care? But now it's like, oh, uh-oh, I'm kind of crumbling, you know? But that's what it is. That's how I'll describe getting
Yeah,
to, yeah, the phases of adjusting.
it is. And I think, for us, um, like when I went to school, I was still not far away from home. I was just kind of going to Toronto. I'm from Burlington, so the drive and the transportation, but I can't even imagine um, moving completely to like really far away from home. Like you're in the GTA and now you're going to McGill. And that is a huge transition for young people in general. And with a fresh new perspective, and that creates a lot of anxiety. And I think that you are navigating it quite beautifully, and you're being as transparent as possible, which is something that I wish I had when I was in your position. Isra, I want to pass it off to you. um I your perspective is a little different, and I know we talked about kind of the connection that you have. But can you share a little bit of your personal experiences with mental health, not just as a student, but as an overall person?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I think my experiences and my perspective with mental health is a little bit different, only given my background being, a kinesiology student. So just to very, very briefly, I was kind of introduced to the idea, I guess, of mental health and well-being in middle school. This isn't something, being in grade 6, starting middle school that, normal middle schoolers would think about. But I had this very close friend of mine at the time, and she was struggling with her mental and physical health. And there was this one incident where my friend's life was at risk, and that was really the moment where I kind of understood, what was going on in her life and what a huge toll that depression had on her overall well-being. So this kind of caused me to take action into supporting her and ensuring her that she got the help and resources that she needed, to feel better. But even in like everyday life, and I'm going to share something very briefly, and it's going to be such a kinesiology student coded example of mine, but even going to the recreation center that's near my house, I constantly see young children being told in very harsh ways by, individuals significantly older than them, adults and even coaches, to pretty much like go past what their bodies are telling them to do and really push the limits when, participating in leisure type of sport or physical activity program. So just even getting to witness that on like a first-hand basis, all those kind of experiences have kind of driven me to really advocate and just be passionate about mental health in general.
Thank you for sharing that. And we chatted a little bit about that lived experience at such an early age. And it is very hard to watch a friend struggle and be able to support them. And also within, your position with school, and um, as, kinesiology, and I used to be a gymnast. The mental health and well-being is such a huge component to our overall well-being, right? It's not just about the physical health, but it's also about the mental health. And I think you really embody that really well with all of the work that you're doing in school. Uh, Rebecca, I'm gonna bring it back to you. Uh, what are some practical steps that faculty members can take to create a more supportive environment for students that are struggling with their mental health? I know for myself, when I was struggling, looking to find a faculty member was difficult. I didn't know where to go or who to talk to. But can you give us a little bit of your insight as to what the faculty can do?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think, in many cases, a faculty member probably isn't the best point of contact other than for information on other sources of support, because we don't have a lot of, most of us, I'm not in psychology. So, we don't have necessarily a lot of training or resources ourselves. But I think that what faculty members can do is educate themselves on what resources are available, so that if a student comes to you, you can point them in the right direction. And there are a lot of resources on campus. And I always remind students, like, you pay for those. Those are all bundled into your fees. So go and use them, because there's lots there. So I think as a faculty member, certainly, learning so that you're able to direct people. And then I also myself choose to be quite open and talk about mental health in my classes and in my my research lab and different events, because I do think that can help to just normalize a little bit some of the struggles that happen at a really hard point in your life during university, and kind of open that conversation a little bit. So I think those are two things. Know what's available so you can point students in the right direction. And if you're comfortable having conversations about your own experience, I think can help students as well.
And how do you navigate having, conversations about your lived experience and that dynamic?
Mm-hmm. It is tricky. And I think it's trickier than ever, in the sense of our lectures are often recorded and posted online. And, I might share a story and think like, oh, I don't know if I actually love that that's out for anyone who gets a hold of that link. But I think some of it's maybe baby steps. Like if I look back to when I started 12 years ago, I probably shared a little bit less. And then each year I thought, oh, that, a couple of students came and talked to me about how much that helped them. So that helped me feel more confident to share a little more the next time. So I think that those baby steps have been a good approach for me. I also, would just say whatever people are comfortable sharing. There are some, professional boundaries, and you probably don't necessarily want to overshare, but expressing that I always say to, my students, like in my family and personally, we've dealt with everything. I can't think of a mental health issue we haven't experienced. And so just being comfortable to share, like, is really helpful. And the baby steps is maybe a good way to do it if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, which is also normal because it is, can be difficult to talk about these things.
No, absolutely. And that's the chat's also saying that baby steps is the first step. And that's kind of the power of that peer support piece, right? It's you give a little bit of yourself and they learn from you. And because they're providing that feedback and saying, hey, like this was really helpful. Like I didn't even think that you could struggle with this. It's always a learning opportunity for all of you. Because sometimes when we are in a position of power, as a professor, you kind of tend to not seem human, right? Like you're this like perfect because you have it all together, and that's why you're up here talking to me. And when I was struggling with my mental health, the last person that I was going to approach was somebody that had all of their ish together, because that's kind of how they present. And now when I even when I chat with you, right, and we've had conversations, it's always been humanizing yourself and saying like, I am a person like this. Just because I'm talking in front of everybody and doesn't mean that gets taken away. And I really admire that, and I'm sure a lot of us also admire that. So thank you for being both.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and would just say I know a lot of faculty members over 12 years, and I haven't met many that haven't struggled. So definitely, I know it seems like maybe we have our stuff together, but everybody has struggles. Everybody.
Thank you. Now, switching it a little bit towards Barira. Can you share an experience when you have experienced that burnout? And once again, that's first year, right? You're navigating a lot of pressure because you don't know what you're navigating. And when there has been moments of, the midterms and the trying to get good grades, how have you experienced that burnout? And what does that look like for you?
That's a fantastic question because it's very topical right now, as midterm season it's coming to a close. Yeah, so I guess I'm in a perpetual state of burnout after last semester, kind of everything piling up together. What I have personally done is I have like to manage the burnout. It's more so just pacing myself and realizing that like and allowing myself to take the time to I guess deal with the stress beyond just instead of just going head on with everything, taking some breaks. And also again, reaching out. What I mean by reaching out is in McGill personally, like I really appreciate the school for providing lots of resources for students. There's talk like call lines that you can contact to literally communicate whatever anxieties you're facing and to just get support. And also every single faculty member that I have actually talked to, or every professor that I've reached out to, or TA, has been very generous with extensions and also realizing that, because a recent experience that I faced was having back-to-back midterms and then papers or 2 or 3 papers on the same day while I'm just in this state of burnout. And so obviously meeting deadlines has been difficult, although I can try my best. It is always nice to know or to have that insurance that I can reach out to a TA, and I have, and they have been understanding and they have allowed me to maybe take another day or whatnot. And, but that's what I mean, having that support, knowing that there are resources, that's what has helped me so much in managing my burnout. But generally experiencing burnout is just a matter of having all these things together and yeah, learning how to manage.
You kind of answer also my second piece of the question around, reaching out. And I love and I'm so happy to hear that you are aware of the resources. A lot of students are not aware. And I know I was not aware of my resources when I was in school. And when you are talking to, let's say, a professor around the exams and the anxiety or extensions, what really creates a safe space for you to do so?
What creates a safe space for me to, I'm so sorry. What was the question?
What's a safe space that the professors TA create for you to share that you are struggling and need an extension?
My apologies. What I mean by that is making or announcing it. I know that there's some, what's it called, professors who are the ones that I don't particularly enjoy are the ones who are very stringent about deadlines, who are very much like there's a no extension policy. The only way that you can, you can submit something late is if you are in the hospital or just, to provide a doctor's note. Being that harsh, I think, is an example of what not to do, and it creates a lot of stress. And unfortunately, that stress can impact your quality of work and your ability to even just function. You know what I mean? So having just showing the grace or like just generally teacher being announcing that okay, if you do submit something late or if you find that you are not going to meet a deadline, you have the option to contact a TA, or you have the option to kind of plead your case, if that makes sense. So I guess verbally announcing that it would be a great way to ease some tensions and to make students more comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to extend my last answer about resources because although my school does provide or it does have access to lots of good resources, some of them are actually quite difficult to access. Like I know that there's the student wellness hub, just generally like accessing your healthcare and your mental health resources. Oftentimes, they're very difficult to contact, and you'll call them multiple times and they won't pick up, or they'll be too busy. You'll call them exactly the time that they tell you to call, and they don't pick up. So unfortunately, exactly. I think in most universities there exists this, I guess, inefficiency within the system of mental health or any kind of wellness, uh, like accessing those resources. And unfortunately, that really does impact students' mental health. And I know a lot of my friends, they're going through the same thing. And yeah, for that reason, I think that's like the negative side of it. But truly, like they do exist, and you just have to really work hard to find them. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I definitely do agree. I'm sure a lot of other people agree. And it does take one person, right? It does take one person to say, hey, I'm struggling and this is what I do, or hey, I found this resource, and kind of passing that down. But I do definitely like resonate when professors were very open around, if you can't make a deadline, just communicate with me. And that would make me feel like, okay, I'm not a failure if I have to extend, right? Like and it's a lot of pressure, especially for us anxious folks that just want to make sure that, everything's fine and everything's perfect. And sometimes things are not like that. A lot of times things are not like that. We're trying to navigate. And again, I love that you're able to really be honest, and say how you're feeling, and also share that knowledge. Felix, passing it on to you a little bit.
Uh,
And first of all, and I've said this before, I love to have male representation. It's very hard to get this, and it's also, I admire how vulnerable you have been throughout working with Unsinkable. And I want to kind of get to know a little bit of like, what are some misconceptions that you've encountered regarding mental health in student communities?
First of all, thanks for those words, making me blush. But yeah, so I'm really passionate about this question because my answer to it is something that's come up so much and I've thought about so deeply over the past couple of years. Um, there's this like idea that we hear a lot on social media and media in general about like these like quick fixes to things like, oh, you're gonna just work out, just grind, get on your grind, and or oh, just take antidepressants and this is gonna happen and that's gonna happen, sleep more. But the reality is, and this is something that I've seen so true in life, is that for a lot of people, not everyone, but this is going to be a like pervasive struggle sometimes. Like there's never really an easy answer. Um, a lot of the people that you see in media are trying to sell you things. And obviously, like that's their job. They're trying to make money. But when you get real with yourself and you communicate with real people, like kind of what we're doing today, you figure out that a lot of people struggle and it's okay. We struggle with these things sometimes our whole lives. Doesn't mean life is meant to struggle. Like we're going to be going through this forever. But, you know, um, learning that also gives me or makes me want to be grateful for the good days. It makes me want to connect with other people when I'm having positive energy because I know how hard things can be. So yeah, I guess my message is really just to um take the hard days as how they are. Um appreciate the good days, but also remember that the hard days aren't forever and that like there's more to life than the struggles that you're having, just um I guess just like relate that to people around you as well and you'll find a lot of happiness.
Yeah, definitely. We can see all of the head nods as you're kind of sharing. I like instant gratification. right? Like that's me. And when it came to my mental health, I wanted a quick fix, right? I want what's gonna take my anxiety, what's gonna, fix my depression and this and that. And you said it perfectly. Like there isn't a quick fix. There isn't something that is gonna just make this all go away. But it's also something that we all here do is we talk about it, right? We talk about what we're struggling with and we're real and we come and we're raw and vulnerable. And I want to throw this back to everybody. When Felix was talking, I saw a lot of nods and I kind of want to hear what you were all thinking when he was sharing his words of wisdom.
I'm happy to go first, and would agree those were very wise words, Felix. Thanks for sharing. And also, as the mom of a young boy, I'm also grateful for your representation because, yeah, too often it seems that the stigma is really powerful in a world full of toxic masculinity, which is a whole nother conversation for another day. What I was thinking of was probably around age 8. You don't typically diagnose people with obsessive compulsive disorder that young, and especially not in the 80s when I was 8. But that would be when that struggle started. And would say there hasn't been one single day since I was 8 years old that wasn't a struggle in some ways. Lots of wonderful days. I have a beautiful life. But that's, yeah, like I think maybe that's part of the problem's not the right word, but like looking for a solution to make this go away is probably the wrong approach because I don't know that that's possible. It doesn't mean it doesn't get quieter. It doesn't mean we can't have a beautiful life, but yeah, thinking that there's a solution that will solve things is probably unrealistic and setting you up for failure. So that's what I was thinking.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
Yes, I'm just going to jump in here. And Felix, thanks for sharing those thoughts. And just to quickly add, I just think that the world we live in right now, the, advancements in technologies, the high pressurized environments, the need to, excel and apply to all these jobs and, just to be pretty much the next best thing and to take every opportunity that comes your way. I think because we're so fixated on those things, we always need a quick fix to everything. Even for instance, let's just say my phone was to break, I don't have time to go take it to someone to go get it fixed. You know what? I will just get a new one, right? But then that's also like a financial strain because not everyone has that privilege and that access to it. So I think that's very important is sometimes we just have to ground ourselves in local realities that, it's one step at a time. And rather than having a quick fix to it, it could be more damaging, just to echo Rebecca there.
Thank you for sharing that. Isra, kind of passing it on to you. Can you, share a little bit about your story and the perspective that led you to become very passionate about mental health and peer support?
Yeah, no, thanks so much for that question. I think, being a graduate student, the academic environment, it's very tough. The academic rigor and the competition, I think personally has impacted my mental health. And I think it was sometime late last year when, I was applying for all these grants. Rebecca, I'm sure you know the whole process of applying to all these grants and then waiting several months to get the results. I think I developed a sense of imposter syndrome there. While I was kind of filling out all the grant applications, they ask you about your resume, your CV, your publications, your conference presentations. And of course, I was just like I just freshly graduated from my undergrad at York, starting a master's again at York. I didn't have a lot of those things, right? I just started getting exposed to all those stuff. So as I'm filling out this grant application, I was just thinking to myself, why even bother applying? It's not like I'm going to get it. And yeah, so that sense of like me never being good enough kind of started to embed into me and just to kind of like, embed into everything I do. And I still struggle with imposter syndrome till this day. but I always tell myself that take it again. We've just kind of spoke about it, take it one step at a time. And my accomplishments are my own, and what other people are doing. Perhaps, someday I'll get to that level, but I just should be content where I am. And yes, that's easier said than done, but it's just been like a constant battle with my inner self on that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely resonate with a lot of what you've shared. I think the piece of that perfectionism, right? Like a lot of us really struggle with that, and we go into high competitive programs, or really dive into our passions, and we want to be perfect, and we want to absolutely, right? It's also that perfection is very, very unattainable, and kind of goes back to what Felix is saying, like this is all like social media, right? We look at these people and they're wonderful, but when we're looking through our screens, they're perfect. And why am I not like this? Or why am I not like this? And the imposter syndrome, I know, I struggle with it all the time, right? Even just coming here and talking, I'm like, what? I have no business hosting anything. And I have to remind myself that, okay, like we're all here, and I'm sure we're all anxious. We're rocking it. But that is the comparison and the perfectionism. And how do you feel, like, how can you break out of that? Is there a way to break out of that?
Honestly, great question. I don't know if there's actually a way to break out of, this whole idea about perfectionism and imposter syndrome. But one thing I'll briefly share is what I do is sometimes my imposter syndrome, it kind of develops or starts to pile up over time. So I'll feel it, let's just say, like I'll really feel burnt out or overwhelmed, like 2, 3 months down the line from like a big event that was to take place. Or let's just say I applied for this funding or this grant and I don't get it. I'll kind of feel it 2, 3 months after. I don't know why that just happens. But what I do is I started to make a list of things that I have accomplished, right? To hopefully remind myself about all the positives and kind of ward off the negatives. That's just something that's helped me personally. I'm sure there's a lot of other creative ways that folks can kind of adapt to if they're also feeling trapped in this sort of, I'm not good enough, I have to be the best.
Thank you. I know, Rebecca, you were
Yeah.
nodding.
Yeah, I mean, recovering perfectionist, like I don't know if you're ever recovered, but I've, definitely struggled with this my whole life as well. And for me, sort of like a rock bottomy moment of like I had my son and was commuting and had started a career, and my husband was away a lot working, and like I just couldn't do it anymore. So I sort of collapsed a little bit. Um, and then there was this real fear to let go of the perfectionism, because I was like, well, that's how I've gotten to this point. Like if I wasn't a perfectionist, I wouldn't have this career. And so really having to work through like that wasn't true, and that actually it was starting, the scales had tipped, like it was hurting me more than it was helping me. And this is a little bit silly, and Felix probably knows a lot more about cognitive behavioral therapy than me, but working with a therapist, I did sort of an exercise that may be helpful to people, I don't know. But I sort of learned to recognize that perfectionist voice in my head, and actually like identified it in my mind, which this may be silly, but was almost as like an abusive like boyfriend. And so it was sort of this voice of like, no matter what I do, it's not good enough. And once I sort of was like, hey, if some boyfriend was talking to me like this, I'd be really ticked off. And so kind of was able to then identify like, hey, that's that voice, and that I don't need that voice to like to thrive. And now everyone, this was many, many years journey. I'm not suggesting that tomorrow you'll solve your problem, but I do think there's that fear of letting go of it, and kind of working through that, to sort of find, yeah, you can actually thrive without worrying about being perfect, which there's no such thing, is my last point.
Yeah, absolutely. There isn't, it's not recovering, right? And it's about kind of being aware that that is a thing, that it is, you're going to struggle for a while with it, and that's okay. And we cope, and we know that this is the expectation that we have of ourselves is something that is too much sometimes, and we can be hard on ourselves. And it's really about that self-awareness is something that I learned very quickly. So thank you for sharing that. Did anybody else want to answer that?
I guess I could just parrot what Rebecca said, like just like really identifying that voice. It because a lot of the voices and ideas we have in our head, like we think it's us. And yeah, sure, it's coming from our head, but what about that voice, like that intrusive thought when you're driving that's like swerve off the highway? That is not like it doesn't make sense, right? So when you put it like that, it reminds you that a lot of the voices in our head are just voices and we don't have to have any type of identification with them. So I just really like that answer.
Me
Thank you.
too. And I just want to, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
And I just want to quickly chime in, like when I think about imposter syndrome or like focusing on perfectionism and I guess comparing myself to other people, I sort of have to ground myself in the sense that I have to think about the effort that I'm putting in. Think about what you're actually doing. So like in the pursuit of a goal, you're putting in your all. If you recognize that you're maybe not putting in enough, or like you're realizing that you could put in more, but it wouldn't affect you if you did. So like, let's say you could work harder, but it wouldn't overexert you, then you should do that. But when it gets to a point where it's like too much, that's not okay. So basically learning to recognize that like perfectionism or just what it should be is just working hard. It's just working hard generally, but not to an extent that like you don't, sorry, that it's stressful for you, if that makes sense. So generally just do the best that you can and put your best foot forward, but you don't need to, I guess, kill yourself to just get something done and to believe that like other people are better than you because blah blah blah. You're putting in your effort and that's all that matters. So that's it. That's what I believe.
Absolutely. This I believe in the no shoulding on yourself. It's actually one of the youth that I was working with said that. And when we should on ourselves, it's like we have this expectation that we have to meet. I should be perfect. I should have good grades. I shouldn't be struggling with my mental health. And that's so unattainable. And when I look at it, it's like I'm setting myself up to fail, right? Because I'm saying all of the shoulds, but my reality is over here. And like that's a big fall. And I had to look at it from that perspective and call myself out every time I said should, because I am like that, right? I have a lot of expectations and I demand excellence of myself, and I'm just human. I'm not, I make mistakes. So I do have to say that I need to stop shooting on myself and be gentle and be compassionate. So, I'm sure that a lot of people that are here are also resonating with that and are hearing that, we're all going through this journey together. And it's really about talking about it. And that being said, let's talk about stigma a little bit. And I know we could talk about stigma for such a long time. But for you, Rebecca, the stigma around mental health can often prevent students from seeking help. What are some of the strategies that you believe are the most effective in combating the stigma and encouraging open conversations?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The first thing that comes to my mind really is the dramatic change around stigma in the 12 years that I've been working as a faculty member. Like it is, night and day difference in a good way. Like there's so much more conversation, so much more, comfort with sharing. And we have a long way to go, but I do think like there's been large improvements in that. I think, you know, it might sound a little bit cheesy, but it really does just come down to talking and sharing. And so, as I mentioned in the very beginning, like as a faculty member, I try to share in my lectures and in conversations with students just to, you know, make sure people feel uh, an openness around that. I think we've seen some changes around stigma through social media, although I'm in a big anti-social media stage right now that I think there's a lot more harm than good. So I'm not gonna celebrate that too much, but we can't deny that we've seen you know, opportunity for people to find their people through that space. And I think that has been helpful around stigma. But yeah, definitely, I think just having conversations, and it can be a little bit intimidating and take some bravery, but I've never had an experience where I was regretful of being open, because I do think chances are someone in the room can really relate.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And you're right. When I was in school, I don't think that one, I would have attended something like this. And two, that it would be so widely spread, right? Like we are doing a collaboration with LaMarsh and York, and that sets kind of a tone of like, this is okay. And a university's recognizing that this is, you know, we're here for it and we want to talk. And I think part of the 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 shift that I have seen is the peer support. It's people coming together that have lived experience in one way or another, talking about it and working through and learning from each other's knowledge and destigmatizing it, because we're here, we're having those conversations. You know, and Barira, kind of going back to you and seeing around the being an academic environment, how do you see peer support and mental health kind of go well together? And is this something that you have seen in your first year?
That is a fantastic question because I can speak on this for days. It is so impactful to have that peer support. I personally have some friends who have communicated to me their struggles, and I have seen that I relate in a lot of ways, you know, whether it be struggles that they've begun to face since coming to university or struggles that they are carrying with them from before. Just having someone, having an ear to listen to you and having someone to relay their experiences and to just share, like, you're not alone. We have, you know, we're all kind of in the same environment in the sense that we're all going through the same um, hardships right now with school and academic stress, but also just knowing that they're going through that and they also have baggage that they're carrying with them as they're going through it, the same as you. It's such a comforting feeling to know that, you know, people are going through it as well. And also not only that, but that they're willing to talk about it and they're not judging you. You know, they understand and they want to help. And that's another thing. Peer support, I feel, now that you've addressed or you know, when you establish that, you know, kind of familiarity, you know that you're all kind of on the same page, you also get other people's perspectives on how they've learned to deal with it. Like I have lots of friends who told me maybe, you know, reach out to this person or you know, go here for, you know, like they've given me resources and they've also given me advice just on little things that they do to help their mental health. And it's such a valuable resource because although we can obviously turn to professionals, I think that just starting out with having just your friends talk to you, it's just the best way to just even like start your journey in towards well-being. So yes, it's very valuable, and I just to anybody, I recommend it so much. Find a supportive group of people who are willing to share and who are willing to listen. Yeah.
Yeah. And you say something so interesting, but yeah, it really clicks, right? It's when you find people that are struggling with the same thing, you find some sort of peace and connection. And it's kind of weird if you think about it, right? Because I'm here talking to you, and we're struggling with the same thing, and I feel comfort. I feel seen. And I think that's something that we miss as humans, is that when we struggle, we don't feel seen or heard. And if your friend is coming to you and saying, "Hey, Felix, like I've been there, done that, like I have different avenues of support that I can provide," all of the sudden you're like, "Hey, I'm not alone. Like you struggle with the same thing." And like that opens that conversation. And it's so important to find your people. And if it's just one person, that's totally okay. If you have more than one person, that's amazing. And it does take baby steps to get there. Felix, now that I was kind of picking on you a little bit, from your own lived experiences, how has peer support played a significant role in your mental health?
Thanks for the question. Peer support, I think, like you were saying, is one of the most important tools we can have in our arsenal. I think especially like you see like an immigrant come to another country, and immediately the first thing they do is connect with people that are from their country, that are in this new country. And that's enough of an illustration to see how important it is to have people that understand you. For me, I am honestly one of those people that have a hard time opening up. I just don't really know how to do it, but I've found ways, lucky enough, and I'm sure there's other people in the audience that have experienced this, but just to like naturally find a connection with people. Funny enough, I one of my cousins, he's also studying psychology, and he was like really struggling to find a lab to volunteer in. And he was like ranting and complaining about how it's been like 3 months, he hasn't heard back from anyone. And like he seemed really down. And funny enough, like I said, like I also was having the exact same experience. And so in connecting with him, it immediately made both of us feel better. And like till this day, like he's the first person I call if I have some type of if something good happens, like more specifically like in academia, but like we're always pushing each other to do better. And I'm very grateful to have that. I know a lot of people don't. So but it's something that's attainable. And even if it's not a friend, like it could be a coworker that also is in school. They don't have to be in the same program as you. It could just really be someone that you could bump heads with. And so for me, it's something that as I get older, I really try to, like when I see someone that's younger than me or that's the same age younger, but is going through something similar, I feel like I have to say something like, nah, like this person deserves to know that they're not alone. So
Mhm.
I hope I also inspire some people to maybe find that connection and like see the importance in it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you bring a really good point around how competitive school is, right? And we go into very competitive programs, and we talked about perfectionism, and we talked around, so many, the university culture. And for you, Rebecca, and in your perspective and really being in it, in the program on research and LaMarsh itself, it's very competitive, very has that strong like workload, and it can be intimidating. And how does that play a role in students' mental health when going into something like this? I know my specialty is mental health addiction in youth, right? Like that's, but when I'm looking into LaMarsh, and when we first connected, I'm like, this is up my alley. And then I was like, maybe not up my alley, because then I got scared, and I got intimidated. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that has felt that way. So from your perspective, can you share a little bit of your thoughts?
Yeah, it is, it is a culture that is not very friendly. Particularly, research focused culture is maybe the like most exaggerated of the academic culture for that. So you're not wrong in sort of observing that and people feeling that way. I don't have wisdom other than I think that things are going to change a little bit because I think, to me, grades, which are the focus of every student from, I remember picking my son up from senior kindergarten and it was report card day. And I remember watching this mom run to her kid's backpack and like dig through and find the report card and look at the report card. And I was like, your kid is 5 years old. Like, what could that possibly say that is so important? But really, this has become culturally so the focus of education, and it's really, really sad. Like, I think that we've lost learning in striving for grades. There's some really interesting research around that people learn less and they enjoy learning less when we're focused on grades. And so I think that, this is going to be a tough ship to turn around. But I do think that there's a lot going on in education right now that may, it might be a painful process, but I think we may land with a little bit different focus. And I think that will affect research as well, that, we've focused so much on outputs in numbers of published papers and talks given and things like that, and kind of lost sight of like, well, why are we doing this? Like, it's not just bean counting. So, I guess my messages are like, one, if you're feeling that way, I think that's a true observation. It's hyper competitive. It feels, that you nothing but 100% is ever feeling good enough to a lot of students. So that's a real observation, but it is really disappointing because people are not learning and enjoying learning. So I think we need to have some change. And I hope to see that before I retire in 23 years, which I think we will.
I think so too. I think that the openness that you bring is so refreshing, especially when it comes, to competitive programs. And I have a couple of the facilitators that are very research driven, and I admire that. And I know, Isra, you're very in that world as well. Do you have any thoughts before I open it to any Q&As?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think being in this research, environment, again, just to kind of repeat myself, it's tough, it is competitive, but peer support, I know we were talking about that earlier, it makes a huge difference. And specifically in academia, there's a lot of uncertainty with things. Even for myself, it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna hopefully get my master's. What's next? Right. And so that anxiety around uncertainty kind of just forces me to go back into school, more schooling, which is silly, but I have resonated with a lot of graduate students that have felt this way. But, at the end of the day, you just have to be kind to yourself. You're doing this the first time, you're living life for the first time ever, experiencing all the hurdles and obstacles and blissful moments for the first time. So, take it one step at a time and be kind, whether you're in academia, outside of academia. So yeah, Rebecca, I think I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add two things if I can remember. One was, yes, you're living life for the first time, but also the only time as far as we know. So, you want to enjoy it and live. So not always focusing on what's next, which I'm guilty of too, but I think that's really a common experience. And then the other thing I wanted to share was just a little I'm only one person, but I just wanted to share this for all the people feeling anxious about their grades. I supervise a lot of students for independent projects, for their master's, for their PhD, and I look at their grades, but I mostly think, do I want to spend 6 months or 2 years or 4 years working with this person? And so I meet with the person and I talk to them and I engage with them. And that's how I make my decision. So I've turned away lots of students with wonderful grades and taken students that have fine grades because I think that they'll have a much better experience working with them. Again, maybe everyone doesn't operate that way, but just so you know, like, on the other side, I don't think grades are the only thing that matter. So I think what will differentiate going forward too, because grades have become hyper competitive, is the human beings that are showing up. And so, yeah, don't lose sight of that.
I really appreciate that insight. If I ever go into research, which, we don't know. We never know. But it's definitely that it takes the stress off that I'm human, and it doesn't I've been in this field for 10 years and nobody has ever questioned that they want my grades. And like I am yet to find an employer that's asked that they want all of my grades. They want all of my essays and this and that. They interview me as Maria, and I go in there myself and I give it my all. And I had to learn very quickly to really separate myself from my grades. And that was really hard for somebody that's a perfectionist. And I only looked at 100 as the perfect. And if I got anything less, then I was a failure. And that was a huge hit for my mental health. I know for a lot of us is the same thing. And no, I know that we are running 2 minutes behind. Um, does anybody have any final words before I close our session? And I don't want to do that. I want to stay and have this conversation. I'm just reading the comments. Anybody wanted to say anything? Last words? All right. Well, once again, thank you for being here and sharing all of your lived experience, your insights, your knowledge, your expertise, and being part of this instrumental conversation that is helping us to build a supportive environment for youth going into their first year, or youth that are currently in school in any type of capacity. I want to thank you for joining us as the attendees. I really appreciate all of your insights, and I want to remind you that it's our commitment as a whole to continue this crucial conversation, that breaking the silence around mental health, especially in student mental health, is a collective responsibility. And I know that we will continue to have this conversation outside of this webinar. So thank you for being here and sharing your evening with me. I had a pleasure of getting to know more about you and sharing this space. And thank you everyone else for joining. Make sure you stay well, take care of yourself, and be kind to one another. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Have a good night.
Good night,
Appreciate
everyone.
watching.
Good night.